So you have guppies in your tank and you want to breed them. Heck, you may even have pregnant females in your tank already. If so, you've come to the right place because I'm about to show you how to breed them. Get ready because we're going to go into detail with this one because guppy breeding is much more complex than you may think. Well, it's true that they're easy to breed, but it can also get advanced. That's why there are so many experienced fish keepers that are still breeding guppies decades into this hobby. So let's jump right in. We're going to cover it all here from tank setup all the way to fry grow out. First, let's talk about tank setup. Guppy tanks don't have to be complicated or fancy, and this is especially true for breeder tanks. But you do want a separate breeding tank, one that is separate from your main community tank. Sure, you can get those breeder boxes that hang on the side of the tank, but those aren't too great in my opinion. Whether it's the biofilm that easily form on the water surface or various other reasons, fry don't seem to grow out as well as they should in those. Again, get a separate breeding tank, and just to cover the basics, let's make sure they have at least a 10-gallon tank. But you don't really need a big tank. Anything around 10 to 30 gallons would be perfect. Keep the temperature between 75 and 82 degrees Fahrenheit, and pH in the neutral to slightly alkaline range of around 7.0 to 8.2. Also keep in mind that guppies prefer hard water, so aim for a general hardness of 8 to 12. Regarding filters, you want a decent filtration system to keep water parameters in check, but at the same time, you don't want something with a water flow that's too strong. Also thinking ahead to when the fry arrive, you don't want a filter intake that might suck the fry in. So some good options would be to get a gentle sponge filter, or if you have a power filter or canister filter, make sure the filter intake is covered with a mesh material to prevent the fry from getting sucked in. Add some plants as well to make them feel more safe and reduce stress. Java moss, Java fern, guppy grass, frog bits, they're all good. Even artificial plants or spawning mops will do the job. Substrate is optional as it does have its pros and cons. Keeping substrate can help reduce the stress level in the fish and also help increase fry survival rate, especially if the large pieces of gravel and rocks are used. As for the cons, it can make it more difficult to clean, at least compared to a bare bottom tank. And here's a pro tip, or a word of caution rather. Many people remember to cycle their new tanks, but when it comes to breeder tanks, they just seem to forget to cycle them for some reason. So even for breeder tanks, always cycle them and allow it to get established before you add the fish into the tank. And this is especially true if you want to breed your fish successfully. Of course, the hack will be to use the aged filter and water from your existing main tank, which should have a bunch of beneficial bacteria already growing in it. Second, let's talk about the mating process. It's not difficult to get guppies to mate, so it's simply a matter of keeping males and females in the same tank. But some things to keep in mind is that you want to pick parents with good genetics if you want to produce good fish. Young, large females that are well fed with a straight spine is what you're looking for. As for the males, you're generally looking for the pretty ones or whatever type of guppy you're looking to breed. Look at the color, fin shape, body shape, and overall health of the fish to choose what kind of guppies you want to breed. After selecting the mating pair, add them into the breeding tank. Keep them in the tank, take good care of them with good food and clean water. Once the females start to look big with a large abdomen, you know they're pregnant. At this point, you could remove the male as you should, because once they're done mating and you know the females are pregnant, the males serve no purpose. In fact, the male will continue chasing the female with its gonopodium, and all this does is it'll waste the female's precious energy when all its energy should really be going towards the development of the fry. So once again, it's best to remove the male and let the female grow out its babies in peace. This brings us into our third point, which is preparing for birth. During this time, you don't want to stress out the female, so don't disturb it too much. Keep the water parameters in check and keep it well fed. High quality flake foods, frozen foods, and live foods will be the key here. As for the flake foods, ones made with quality protein-rich ingredients will be good. As for frozen foods, frozen brine shrimps are great. And as for live foods, Daphnia, mosquito larvae, scuds, and white worms are great, just to name a few. By keeping it well fed, you'll be able to make sure the babies are well nourished for development. And also when it comes time for when the mother gives birth, it wouldn't be so eager to eat its own fry. Of course, the plants in the tank will also provide cover for the fry, and that will help survive as well. The combination of a well-fed mother and plenty of plants and other cover in the tank should allow for a decent survival rate for the fry. This is usually a better option than using a breeder box, for example. By the way, the average brood size will be something around 30 to 60 fry. However, it can actually range anywhere from 20 to 200 fry. Imagine a large female guppy that gives birth to 200 free-swimming fry every month. Now that's a prolific breeder. Once you notice that the mother gave birth, give the mother some food. It's usually hungry after giving birth, so feed it well and move it out of the breeding tank as soon as possible. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but this method allows you to keep the fry in the same tank. This means there's no need to transfer them to a whole new environment where it could have different water parameters, potentially causing unnecessary stress to the newborn fry. All this can be prevented by having the female give birth to the fry in the breeding tank where you intend to grow the fry out as well. This brings us to our last and final point, which is caring for the fry and growing them out. And to make this really simple, caring for the fry is basically about keeping the tank water clean, maintaining stable water parameters, and keeping it well fed. Feeding newborn fry can be a challenge, but feeding guppy fry is much easier compared to many other fish species. As live bearers, guppy fry start out as free-swimming fry, so they're much easier to feed. With that said, even guppy fry are too small to start out with regular dry flake food, so the flake food needs to be ground up into powder form. Hard-boiled egg yolks can be good as well, but it can pollute the water, so watch out for that. While these are probably the most convenient options, the best options for the fry will be live fish food, especially for newborn fry. We'll call this phase 1. It's easiest to get them started on freshwater copepods, baby brine shrimp, microworms, and vinegar eels. Once they're slightly larger, perhaps in a couple weeks, we'll call this phase 2, you can feed them larger invertebrates such as Moina, Daphnia pulex, and grindle worms. Once they put on more size, perhaps in the second or third month, we'll call this phase 3, you can feed them even larger invertebrates such as Daphnia magna and whiteworms. Of course, you can continue to feed baby brine shrimp as well throughout this period, as many breeders do. Similarly, dry flake food that is either ground up or crushed can be fed throughout this time as well, in addition to these live fish food. Around this time, the juveniles are probably large enough or almost large enough to join the other adult guppies. One last tip is regarding temperature. As mentioned earlier, the ideal temperature range for guppies is 75 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, and the same goes for their fry. However, keep in mind that the fry have smaller stomachs and therefore require smaller and more frequent feedings. If you're able to feed the newborn fry multiple times per day, let's say over 5 times per day, you may get good growth with a higher temperature in this range. On the other hand, if you're not able to do this, let's say you can only feed them 2 to 3 times per day, my recommendation is to maintain a slightly lower temperature within this range. Lower temperatures will result in slower metabolism, so therefore slower growth, but at least the fry will not be starving in between the feedings. Also, in a heavily planted tank, there will be many small invertebrates such as copepods, and the fry will be able to snack on them as well in between feedings.